Bruce Springsteen Live provides fans with an intimate look into Springsteen's creative process. The Bruce Springsteen Live exhibit opens at the Woody Guthrie Center on Saturday, April 16th, running through Sunday, September 25th. The exhibit will feature iconic artifacts, live performance footage, instruments, stage costumes, exclusive interviews, concert posters, and photography, as well as unique interactive displays to immerse fans in Bruce Springsteen and the band's creative process. More information can be found at woodyguthrieCenter.org. Please let them know that Set Listing Bruce sent you there, and I'll see you in Tulsa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today, a return guest, one of my newest podcast partners, Mark Dempsey, aka UK Mark. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm good. It's always lovely to see you, Jesse. Thanks for having me on this.
Yeah, so since we've had you on, you've joined us on one of my other podcasts, How Many, for multiple times, and you and Gary Grant, another one of my good friends, are actually doing your own podcast. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Well, having joined you a few times, our mutual love of Springsteen led us to identify our mutual love of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And it's always fun to join you and your friends in Texas from over here near London in the UK. To just talk broadly about the Cowboys. But yeah, me and Gary have already released one episode. We are about to record this weekend a second episode of a Dallas Cowboys focused podcast. I think we'll get onto a few other wider sports topics. Gary and I are both big English soccer fans, Major League Baseball fans. But yeah, it's going to be 90% Dallas Cowboys content, NFL content. And I'm excited to be able to spend this next year with Gary kind of talking through the offseason, the draft, free agency, all the weird and wacky things that happen when you're a Dallas Cowboys fan with that organization, and then hopefully a successful season. So yeah, it's going to be good fun, but we're here to talk more Bruce now.
Yes, we are. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, and then we're going to move on. I loved because, Gary is one of the most passionate, yet he can be very logical about his support. I mean, he doesn't let emotions at times, like he will, no, I know you feel like it's been a big draft, that's a bad draft, but if you look at the numbers, or so I've loved listening to you guys so far. I'm excited.
Thank you.
So Fix That Blank Rich is the name of the podcast, based on a famous incident that Dallas Cowboy fans will get. So yeah, look for it wherever you can find your podcast. Check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Exactly.
All right. So how's everything else going with you? Life good?
Well, yeah, it's good. Although I do want to say this on a serious, really serious note. As we're recording this in March 2022, there's a war happening on the edge of Europe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let this pass without just kind of sharing with everyone that's listening. I never thought I would see this in my lifetime, and I would just appeal to everyone in Europe, every country in Europe, every person in Europe, to just make this as easy as possible for Ukrainian refugees.
Yes.
Give to charity, give some spare coats, give some spare shoes. These people are just at a moment's notice are homeless, heading to Poland, heading to Germany, heading to the UK. We just need to make this easy as possible for them to have a safe passage to countries around Europe.
Well said, sir.
I spent 5 years living in Canada, five of the happiest years of my life, and I saw several instances where Canada just opened its borders to refugees. That's the model that we should be following.
Absolutely.
I hope Europe follows that kind of example that Trudeau, particularly for his government in Canada,
Yeah.
set a few years ago. So awful times, and I didn't want to let this pass, because we're going to have some fun talking about Bruce, but it's a very worrying time over here in Europe. I've never seen anything like it.
Oh, we're very nervous here that it is a lot. You know that if things continue to go down a path, if things are very dire now,
Yeah.
but there is the potential for it to be even worse. And so, we're all, hoping for the best. And you're right, helping out in a little ways. There are a lot of great organizations out there that do your diligence, look for people there. There are ways to check ratings on charities, how effective they are. Do that. In fact, if you think of a couple that have done well, I know I have a couple. I may add it into the show notes.
Okay.
So yeah, sounds great.
Perfect.
All right. So we have a little thing here called Songs of Your Life. So to give a little background, because every episode is the possibility of someone's first episode. The sports station I listen to all the time is called The Ticket, and they used to do a segment called Biggest Show Coming to Town. And it was basically an excuse for the host to debate all the concerts coming to the DFW area for the next week, and then they would discuss them. Then they would vote, okay, this was the biggest show coming to town. Well, when the pandemic happened over 2 years ago, shows stopped.
Yeah.
And so they started doing a segment called Bands of Your Life, and it was 11 questions. You had to pick a band to answer every question, but you couldn't repeat a band. And I really liked it, and I thought about that would be a fun thing to do. And Chris Jackson said, yeah, that's fun, Dad, but you could figure out a Bruce. Can you figure out a Bruce, angle? And so I did Songs of Your Life. So these are 11 questions. All need to be answered with a Bruce song. And you cannot repeat a song, which is what makes it a little fun. So Mark, as we get started, did you know right away the songs you wanted? Did you have to do some thinking? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I had to do a little bit of thinking on a few of them. There's a run right there in the middle. I think questions like 4 through 7. That was just obvious to me which songs they were going to be, but not necessarily the order they were going to be in. So one I love, one that made me love Bruce, one I can play over and over. So those 4 songs for me were obvious, but I had to give a little bit of thought time to, okay, where exactly do they fit?
Yes.
I struggled a lot actually with the first 2,
mm-hmm.
being the more negative ones, right?
Yes, they are, and that's why we start with those.
And that's why I wondered. That's why you start with them.
Yeah.
But no, it fell quite quickly into place. The one I really had to think about, that I have got a few thoughts for you on, really intrigued me, because I've never been asked before about the song that surprised me or a guilty pleasure. So those 2 questions.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that.
In fact, I went for a walk this morning with my wife and my dog, and kind of in the fields, we kind of were talking it through to help me kind of get down to the final one. But yeah, so they were hard.
That sounds good.
They're good questions.
All right, here we go. Then let's start originally with the first question, which is the most negative song that you hate, or as I put in parentheses, don't get.
So there's a few that really I skip every time. Or only a few, I should say, that I skip every time. I'll Work for Your Love came to my mind. I really don't care for I'll Work for Your Love. I love the Devils and Dust album, but Silver Palomino, there's something about the sound of the song. It just turns me off. I really dislike Where the Bands Are. That to me is just such a dirgy, basic, dull song. But the song that is quite easy for me to answer is Queen of the Supermarket.
Okay.
I hate that song.
Okay.
I think the lyrics are basic, the premise is basic, the music, the musicianship is basic, and these are never things you say about Bruce Springsteen.
Right.
I would also say that the reason it is at the absolute top, I can leave it off the album. It's not Working on a Dream. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Working on a Dream for me is maybe his weakest album.
Sure.
In 40 years worth of work. But I went to see 3 nights in a row in Stockholm in 2009, early in I think the start of the European tour for Working on a Dream. Really great shows. And halfway through night 2, and I've researched this morning, I've just gone and checked. So night 2, the show was going beautifully, unbelievable, great pace, beautiful show.
Yeah.
The run of songs went like this: Youngstown, Good Loving, Hungry Heart, Growing Up, Thunder Road.
Ooh.
And then he played Queen of the Supermarket. And Jesse, I'm not kidding. I've never seen the atmosphere go out of any concert, let alone a Springsteen concert. It was embarrassing. The band could see it. We were in the pit right down the front. The band could see it. Bruce could sense it. Everyone could see it. It was a en masse toilet break for half the stadium. Those of us that stayed in the stadium just really standing there waiting for the song to end. I've never seen anything like it. So it's not a great song, but that destroyed the pace of that whole show.
Interesting. All right, got it down. All right, here's a little bit more. What is the song you think is overrated?
Okay. Again, a few here that kind of made it into my final thought list. Waiting on a Sunny Day, Mary's Place. They're just probably overplayed now, over kind of cartoonish in shows. I've never really got Because the Night. I've always found that a little bit dirgy. I've always found that I don't ever kind of celebrate that coming on in concert, except for the fact, as you know, my love for Nils Lofgren. So that kind of turns that around for me when you get to see Nils do what he does to Because the Night.
Yeah.
But my overrated song, the one I just don't get, is Frankie.
Okay.
The Born in the US outtake that has since been, I think, released on some collections. I just don't get it. I think it's overly long. I don't like the tune, the rhythm. I don't connect with the song at all. I know there are people out there that will tell you Frankie is one of his greatest songs that's ever been written, that it should have been on Born in the USA. For me, it just doesn't connect at all.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting, right? The different people, and that's part of the reason why I really love this discussion, is you do have that, oh, okay, really? That's your choice? And so very, very interesting. What is it now? Let's flip it. What is the song you think is underappreciated that people do not give enough?
Okay. So I think there's large chunks of the Seeger Sessions album. I think that's a strong album. I loved the idea of what he was trying to do there. A large part of the Seeger album, a large part of the Human Touch and Lucky Town albums, I think, are very, very underrated.
Okay.
And an awful lot of the Ghost of Tom Joad as well doesn't seem to get the credit that it should. And interestingly enough, I saw a tweet earlier on from someone talking about how underrated Take It As They Come is, which is absolutely up there for me. That's a very underrated song. I've been lucky to see that in concert once. Love it. But I've worked on the theory of, when I've talked to fans in a pit queue, standing on the floor of a stadium, waiting for a show to start, the song I've been saying for 10 years, I'd love to see this, and no one seems to go along with it, is You'll Be Coming Down from Magic. I've never seen it.
Okay.
And I think You'll Be Coming Down from the Magic album is just a beautiful piece of songwriting. Lyrically, one of his best. Lyrically, the picture he paints, it's poetry, but it's just a great rock and roll song. I've never met another fan that agrees with me that it's one of his top songs. It's probably in my top 20 of all time Springsteen songs. You'll Be Coming Down. as far as I can tell, no one rates that anything like as high as I rate it. I love that song. I play it very regularly.
I will have to go back and listen to it, and with fresh ears. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So, song that you love.
Okay. So now we're into that run of kind of four
Yes.
straight songs that are probably my four. They're probably my four Springsteen songs.
Right.
Tell me I could only listen to four ever again, and we're probably into that run of those four
Okay.
songs. So in terms of the song I love, it's Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, I mean, it's a truly great song, powerful, powerful song. The lyrics the entire way through are incredible. Seeing it live is a whole nother experience. I mentioned to you on another podcast we did.
Yeah.
I love that song, particularly the way he's played it on the Ghost of Tom Joe tour.
Yeah.
Solo acoustic. But seeing the E Street Band nail Darkness on the Edge of Town is something else. But it's the final paragraph in the third verse that does it for me. It's kind of what I think of myself. So the final paragraph, I'll be on that hill, I can't stop. I'll be on that hill with everything I've got. Life is on the line where dreams are found and lost. I'll be there on time and I'll pay the cost. That's kind of my approach to life. That's kind of, if I had to find a Bruce Springsteen sentence that summarized me, it would be that one.
Well, we need to get a hold of that one lyric, and have him. I will do an email and connection and say, hey, let's get Mark on that show.
Okay, no, I've seen that quoted on Twitter a few times. That one lyric, yeah, please do. That sounds fun. Yeah. Okay. I just think, you've got to know me a little bit over the course of the last year. I'm a pretty passionate guy.
Yeah.
I fight for what I believe in. And
I love it. I think that's a great. Yeah.
That lyric to me has always just been how I view myself. I will be there on time and I will pay the cost.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, beautiful. All right, song that you can listen to over and over again.
Yeah, this one's easy. Racing in the Street.
Okay.
Beautiful. Incredible craftsmanship. I just love some of my favorite concert memories are the surprise when that one comes in. It's certainly not a song you can ever expect to see on any tour at any given time. But I have a lot of memories of being quite young. As a young Springsteen fan, that live 75 to 85 album I got when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
And Racing in the Street was one of the songs that I would play over and over, just lying on my bed, headphones on, kind of 13, 14, 15 years old, teenage angst, angry, confused, all of that stuff. Racing in the Street, live 75 to 85 was my go-to song to just chill out, think things through.
I love it.
That might be the Springsteen song I've played most in the last 30 years.
That's great. I love that. I also like the idea that, Betsy Hodges, who's been on the show, has said that if there is a heaven and if you get to ask, the supreme being anything you want, her question is, how many times have I listened to Thunder Road? So yeah, I love that one. All right. Let's see. Next up, song that made you fall in love with Bruce.
Okay, so you could do these next two songs either way around. They would work either way around.
Okay.
But for this one, the song that made me fall in love with Bruce, I've gone with Cadillac Ranch.
Okay.
But not the album version. You and I have talked before, but
yeah,
there was that 1987 BBC TV documentary.
Yeah.
And it had video footage from the previous 10 years of Bruce. The concept of the documentary was to actually, it was an interview that Bruce did for some publicity for the live 75 to 85 album.
Yeah.
So most of the songs that they showed on this video or on this TV program were from live 75 to 85.
Right.
And they picked Cadillac Ranch, and they showed the whole of Cadillac Ranch on this TV documentary from the final night of the Born in the USA tour, 1985 in LA. And it made me fall in love with Bruce, but it made me fall in love with Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, more importantly. Right. Anyone listening to this that hasn't seen it or doesn't get the reference, really, it's just 3.5 minutes of beautiful rock and roll.
Sure.
Goofy, stupid fun. It particularly brought me very close at a young age to Nils Lofgren. This is one of those shows where Nils was playing his on the Born in the USA tour. He had a blue, multi-tone blue, very angular Gibson guitar, not what he normally plays at all. You can see it on the Born to Run video. Yeah. And I loved that. I loved that guitar just as a young person just getting into music. And there's Nils in this ridiculous cowboy hat and kind of bright red and white top, spinning around, dancing around. Him and Bruce at one point are down on their knees, swinging their guitars around their heads, right? Cadillac Ranch itself is a great, wonderful rock and roll song. Yeah. I love it. I always want to see it in concert. But it's that video, it's that version that made me fall in love with Bruce. I was already a fan. I'd already heard Dancing in the Dark, some of the Born in the USA material, etc. I was already a fan, but I wasn't yet in love with Bruce, and I certainly wasn't yet in love with the E Street Band.
Right.
That moment, and arguably, particularly the interplay between Bruce and Nils, that was when the love started.
That's great. I love that. All right, song that changed your life.
Dancing in the Dark.
Okay.
Must have been May 1984. Sitting in my bedroom at home in London, or near London, listening to America's Top 40 with Casey Kasem. I've mentioned this to you before. And on comes Dancing in the Dark. Changed my life. Full stop. Mm-hmm. From the first notes.
Yeah.
Grabbed me. I've said this to you before, but later on, a few years later, my mum turned around and told me that she remembered the moment I heard it because it was the first time she'd ever seen me kind of just sit down, shut up, do nothing, and listen to something. I was very hyperactive as a kid. And that was it. Dancing in the Dark, those first synthesizer notes, that beat, changed my life.
Yeah, great choice. All right, song that surprised you.
All right, so these are the hard ones. So
yes.
We've flown through those early ones, so maybe just a couple of different thoughts here.
Sure.
So the first thing that I went to with this, because live concerts are such an important part for not just for me, for the vast majority of Springsteen fans, I think would tell you the same. But
yeah,
the albums are one thing, but the live connection is entirely something else. And there are two very specific moments where I can remember being surprised. And I think not just me, this like the audience being surprised. Give you the quick two examples. So my wife and I went over to New Jersey for nights 9 and 10 in 2003 of the long stand at Giants Stadium. So that whole summer 2003, they were playing on and off at Giants Stadium. Night 9, August the 30th, 2003 is one of the best few shows I've ever seen. Really good rocking show. And halfway through the encores, just out of nowhere, they pulled out Pretty Flamingo. And surprised is the understatement of the century. But I remember the whole stadium almost kind of in like gasping, intake of breath. And I just remember looking around the stadium and everyone was just kind of standing stock still, taking it in. You could almost see 55,000 people just standing there going, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. So from a surprise perspective, that one's pretty high up. The other one from a live perspective that comes to my mind is early on the Ghost of Tom Joad tour. So he came to Europe in February 1996. And I went down to see him in Paris. And it was actually, for the Ghost of Tom Joad, it was quite an unruly crowd. It was not disturbing, not through the songs, but it's very, very passionate fan base in Paris. And the shows at that time were kind of pretty much all ending with Galveston Bay and My Best Was Never Good Enough. And I'd seen a show in the US a few months previous that, as you know, was very polite. There was very little applause, very polite applause in between each songs, no interruptions. And the show itself was pretty steady. By the time it had come to Europe, the encores were actually a little bit more rock and rolly. So I remember in Paris, the encores were like Bobby Jean, No Surrender.
Yeah.
A little bit more upbeat, and the crowd got really into it. And then it came time for Bruce to play what would always have been Galveston Bay. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no way he's doing Galveston Bay now. The crowd is too up for it.
Yeah. They're amped.
It's amped. He's going to do something else. He'll switch it. There's no way the mood now fits Galveston Bay. And he played Galveston Bay. And the same kind of thing that happened with the Pretty Flamingo thing. 3,000 people, whatever it was, just suddenly shut up and listen. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen him do in concert. Because everything about it said he shouldn't have done it. Everything about it said he should have kind of called an audible. This
isn't going to work, yeah.
Right. Done a off-the-cuff version of like Two Hearts or something, right? And just kept it going with what it was. He forced the crowd back down, played the song he wanted to play, captured everyone's imagination. And I remember looking around the room, sensing what everyone was going through. And it was a really, really magical moment. So an element of surprise there from a live perspective. But what I did want to say probably is my biggest surprise. I remember listening through Letter to You last year when it came out.
Right.
And very quickly, from even the first couple of songs, really thinking, wow, this is a real return to form. So, arguably the last few albums haven't had some of its greatest writing on.
Yeah.
Certainly High Hopes didn't, right?
Yeah.
Certainly Working on a Dream didn't. Wrecking Ball was better. And Western Stars was kind of very much take it or leave it, depending on your style.
Yeah.
But Letter to You, I think, is a return to form from a songwriting and a rock and roll perspective. Right. And then when Burning Train started, I was like 12-year-old Mark listening to Bruce for the first time again.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to go with Burning Train as my surprise. I think that's one of his top songs I think he's ever made.
Yeah, I've often said that when we get a new tour, I picture them opening with Burning Train. Other people have said Ghost, which I could see either one, right? But the same thing, even though in the film they end with Burning Train, when I heard that, I went, oh my goodness, this is Meet Me in the City. This is Radio Nowhere. This is Badlands. This is that. Okay, here we are. Let's get it going.
You're absolutely right. It gives me shivers even right now.
Yeah.
Thinking about listening to it for the first time 18 months ago, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. I thought, there's our show opener.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and see him 10 times on the next tour. And every night pretty much is opening with Burning Train, and I am all in for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Burning Train is a sensational rock and roll song. Yeah. And I have to admit, it surprised me because it beyond my wildest expectations of what this new E Street Band album was going to sound like.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Great answer. Great answer. So there's a lot of debate here and I am certainly one of those fans that say there are no such things as guilty pleasures, that if it brings you pleasure, it's pleasure. But for the sake of completing the list, song that is a guilty pleasure for you.
Okay. So here was the short list, all right, because this one took some time, because I was like, well, I get pleasure from all of them. They're all incredible. I certainly don't feel any embarrassment or shame or reason to see them as a guilty pleasure. But then I thought there are some actually which are more guilty pleasure than others as I started to think about the question. Thundercrack, that makes the short list. Ramrod, like just stupid, daft,
Yeah.
incredible beat. 10th Avenue Freeze Out. Certainly, I probably get more excited than any grown man should when I'm standing in an arena and 10th Avenue starts.
Yeah.
And that was my wife's pick, actually. Catherine, when we were talking about this morning, was like, it's got to be 10th Avenue Freeze Out. Right?
Yeah.
And then Growing Up nearly made it, and Growing Up nearly made it for the stories. But
Yeah.
again, like Bruce has a really great history of kind of throwing weird, wacky 5-minute stories into the middle of Growing Up.
Right.
He was doing it in 85. You can find some really, really funny interactions, particularly with Clarence in 85.
Yeah.
You go back again, live 75 to 85. I'll listen to that 15-minute version of Growing Up with the crazy story about how his dad calls him up and tells him it's not too late. You can still go back to college, right? At the age of 25 as a successful rock and roll star. Guilty pleasure, certainly. But this one goes back to kind of young Mark, right? You and I have talked before about the importance of kind of 12-year-old, 13-year-old Mark and discovering Bruce. My guilty pleasure is Twist and Shout.
Ah, nice.
As far as I'm concerned, he can finish every concert for the rest of time with Twist and Shout, and I will be a very, very happy guy. And there's two real specific ones, two real specific reasons for this. Number one, if you haven't seen it, if anyone hasn't seen it, I would recommend looking it up. You can see the whole thing on YouTube. Look up the final night of the Amnesty International tour in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Okay.
And look up Twist and Shout. It's the most fun 11 minutes you will spend this year looking at something on YouTube. This is the end of this crazy 3-month blast around the world that they did with Sting and Tracy Chapman and Gabriel. And it's just beautiful, fun, goofy spirit. I think that sums up the spirit of Springsteen and the E Street Band. Again, I probably am more used to looking for Nils and seeing what he's doing because I love the interactions. But watch Nils through it; he's just having a blast. He's partying. Like the whole band is just having this incredible sense of community and fun. The audience is going nuts. It's just a wonderful thing to see. And the other reason for it is I just think it's just an all-time great show closer. I think it's a way to connect with the audience, regardless of who you are, regardless if you're there for the first time or the 60th time, regardless of whether you know much about Bruce or you don't know much about Bruce. Twist and Shout is one of his first songs, right? I think he's spoken about Twist and Shout was one of the first series of chords he ever learned to play. I think he's mentioned that specifically. So you're actually watching someone on stage in front of 60,000 people playing one of the things that was most influential to them. You know, I'll let that song go on 15 or 20 minutes. I know some people can't stand it. Some people have had enough of it. Some people never want to see it ever again. And that is my absolute guilty pleasure. The Rising Tour 2003, my wife and I went over to Scandinavia for a few shows. Saw the band in Copenhagen, saw the band in Oslo. And then the final night of the run of shows that we'd gone to was in Gothenburg, which funnily enough, is one of the only few shows I would ever say wasn't a great show. Like the band seemed tired, it seemed flat, the audience was flat. And the show, again, rare to say this for Bruce, right? But the show came to was coming to a fairly predictable ending in terms of the encores, in terms of some of the songs that have been selected. And they get to the end of what you think is going to be the final song. And then he suddenly, just out of nowhere, out comes Twist and Shout. First time I'd ever seen it. Gothenburg, 2003. And that sticks in my head as being, oh, okay, this song I want to see more often. So that's my guilty pleasure.
So what's funny is I think that could have been the last song, right? That your last answer to your last question. What it's certainly not my place to criticize Bruce. I think I've had the discussion with Terry Smith, the guy who does the music talks, and his wife, will pick at him. Oh, isn't it a shame Bruce has John Landau instead of you helping him, right? Because he'll have advice, right? If I had the choice, I would say this last couple tours, Shout's been the closer. And I wish that they would, if you want, rotate, like, the Detroit medley, Twist and Shout, Shout, just if he wants to end in a classic, which I think is a fun way to end, I would just rotate some different ones in there, just to fun.
Agreed. I've not been, I like it. I like the idea of finishing with a cover. I like that, particularly a kind of a classic cover.
Exactly.
But I would choose Twist and Shout over Shout 10 times out of 10.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I've never seen him do Twist and Shout live, so that I would absolutely love that. Yeah. Because it is the, it is such an iconic cover, right? Between the original with the Isley Brothers, with the Beatles, and just I agree. All right. Song you wish you had seen live.
Easy one word answer. Fire.
Okay.
Never seen it. Easily one of my top 20 Springsteen songs. That could easily be in my song I think is very underrated.
Okay.
Beautiful, fun. Love the beat. Love the lyrics. Love the way I've seen it on videos on YouTube, etc. Played live. Fire. Easy answer.
Perfect. All right. Last question. Great song to see live, and you can't answer all of them.
This was nearly 10th Avenue Freeze Out.
Yes. That was my choice.
Oh, was it really?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I specifically was thinking of the Live in New York, that epic. I mean, that's a show right then and there. Like yes.
And there's been a couple of times I've seen him open with 10th Avenue Freeze Out, including the show that you and I were at together in Dallas, if I'm not wrong. It's a great show opener. It's a great show closer. It's full of spirit. It's everything that we want from a Springsteen show. It's one of the few songs I'd probably sign up for every night, every show for the remainder of our time. But the one I'm going with is Land of Hope and Dreams. Land of Hope and Dreams is just an insanely special song. The lyrics, the construct, the way that every member of the band gets to shine at some point through it. I mean, particularly Max, right? The beat, the nature of it. There's slow parts, there's fast parts. The lyrics are intense and emotional. Love it. One of my all-time favorite songs. And there is something about there's an album version, right, which is great and beautiful.
Yeah.
But I was trying to think about a song that takes on a whole nother level live.
Yeah.
And for me, that's Land of Hope and Dreams.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if he does this as much now, but for the longest time, as Max is starting the drums and this intro, and he says to the mic, "This is Land of Hope and Dreams." Truly a modern, in Springsteen terms, classic that is just truly, as I've said many times, it's probably it and Better Days are my two favorite songs. So
really? Okay.
Yeah, those are my two. If I had to, and picking favorites is always a fun, kind of thing back and forth. There's been as we're discussing this on Twitter, I believe it was John Alba, the writer, tweeted his list of albums ranking, and there then became immediate, you're crazy and you don't know. And I went through a spell of, I think you forgot, in my opinion, right? Because it's all just subjective. Well, Mark, this is great. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to us talking again. We are you and Rachel and I are all planning to spend a episode devoted just to Niels Lofgren, which I think is going to be a blast.
The great Niels Lofgren.
Yes, I think so. I'm looking forward to that. You guys are recording a new episode of your podcast with Gary, and so that's going to be fun. I think it's always interesting. There's a lot of drama with every team in the off season, but I think especially this year, there's a lot that the Dallas Cowboys need to do if they're going to come back and do a better year. And I'm seeing speculation that like they're kind of timing to work on getting Sean Payton, and they're not worried about 2022.
I'm seeing the same kind of thing. And what's interesting to me is I'm not just seeing that as idle speculation from the average fan.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that from people that know what they are talking about.
Yeah. And I just think you can't waste a year.
I agree.
I mean, just that is the way, and there's a whole discussion that I know you and Gary had, and that do you go for it all every season and then worry about the future later, or do you try to manage your cap and go for the long run? And until it works, there's not the right decision. And like with the Rams, they put it all and they've won a Super Bowl, so here we'll wait and see.
I don't even want to see that model being followed. At several points in the regular season, they were a couple of plays away from not making the playoffs. When they made the playoffs, they were a couple of plays away from not making the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So no one would have been saying the way the Rams did it is the right way to do it if they'd lost. So I'm not calling for that, but there's more aggressive ways to play this game.
Mark, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
MKD1973 on Twitter.
All right. Thank you so much, my friend. It is always a joy talking to you.
Pleasure,
Listeners,
Jesse.
Go get vaccinated, go get boosted. Let's think good thoughts. And as Mark started the episode with, if you can do a little bit to help those leaving Ukraine as refugees, do some research, find a good charity, throw a few bucks that way, and let's think good thoughts about everyone there in Europe. It's a scary time.
It is. Thank you, Jesse. That's a great note to end on. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. I want and need your feedback. You can reach me multiple ways to tell me what you like or don't like about the show. You can reach out to give me guest suggestions or maybe to join me on the podcast yourself. We're on Twitter at SetListingBruce or at Jesse Jackson DFW. I have an Instagram, SetListingBruce or Jesse Jackson DFW. Our Facebook page, facebook.com/SetListingBruce. Go to patreon.com/SetListingBruce to find out how you can support the show, and we have several tiers of support. Please go to your favorite podcast player and hit subscribe, and tell a friend about the podcast, because that is the way we're going to grow. If you're not tired of hearing me speak, you can hear me on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, where Charles Skaggs and I talk all things Doctor Who. The How Many podcast, where me and my friends Gary, Scott, Bob, and Jr. talk pop culture. And finally, my newest podcast, The Last Best Hope for Conversation, a Babylon 5 podcast, where Karen, Lou, and I are going through the TV show Babylon 5 one episode at a time. I am always looking for guests, so please reach out to me, setlistingbruce@gmail.com.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.